Okay, this just came in yesterday, but it was from Tuesday, I believe. Man accused of smuggling ancient Egyptian artifacts through JFK airport in dirty suitcase. Let's look at this. This is just, I don't know if this is all or a sample of them, but he had a series of suitcases that he came back with a huge amount of suitcases, and they were all packed up with all of these artifacts that you can see here. I know it's a little bit of a small picture and the pieces are real small, but where my pointer here is those blue shabtis that are there, and then there's the smaller variant here, and there's got to be 100 of them, and there's even a row of some more of those here, and the smaller blue forms that are here. All of these coins and things that are here too, it seems. There are oil lamps that are displayed here, statuettes and things that are shown here. Oddly, looks a little like a Buddha. Would like a closer look at that. This looks very Ptolemaic and Greek and somewhat. Old, old pottery styles from perhaps even the pre-dynastic going through here. There are more of the shabti that are here, of course. There are platelets, which are pieces of plaster that are off the walls of a tomb, which would have been nobility or a king, in pieces that are here. Just some pieces of it. A sacred doll, which would have been a temple at the time, they're saying. A face of Hathor, if you will. Faces here and here that have been broken off, separate from statues. It's not believed that they found them like this, that they chipped the rest off to try to make it smaller so they could fit it in there and just pseudo destroyed the object. Interestingly, they say that these plasters here, 1, 2, 3, are actually from temples that someone has stolen. So I want to mention that this entire thing here is because of looting and tomb robbing. And if you thought this was a culmination of all the tomb robbing that had happened in the last year, you'd be a fool. And if you were to believe that it had gone on only to this level per year for the last 50 years, if not 150 years, you would be a fool. And one wonders why such things get destroyed, but hey, people are willing to pay a hell of a lot of money for black market items of ancient Egyptian stuff and things like that. Also disturbing right here is the tops, but only the tops, off of some of the canoptic jars that they put the bodily remains into that were sacred. And in fact, they've got a better picture of that, and let's go to that. Here they are. You can see their distinctive Caucasian phenotype, but these have been old. I can't date them just on looks and little things that are going on. I'm going to call it Middle Kingdom. But where's the rest of it at? And that tablet that you see right there, who the hell cut that off a wall in a temple someplace? I see the feathers there in the back. Is this Isis? Well, it was found by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And after we go through this thing, I'll tell you something that about me and my dealings with them, but it's somewhat of a different thing altogether, for I was really dealing with the U.S. Parks and Wildlife, but that's actually the same thing. And there are certain hubs that things are only allowed to come into the United States. I'll get into that later. So a Brooklyn man was indicted for illegally trying to smuggle hundreds of Egyptian artifacts stuffed inside dirty suitcases through JFK Airport. Well, what's dirty? Is it a dirty bomb? Is it? No, it's, we'll get into that, including some nearly 4,000-year-old relics. Federal prosecutors announced Monday, so they're going to prosecute this guy fully. We'll get to that. Ashraf Omar Eldarer, 47, was caught at the Queen's Airport in January, allegedly carrying 3 suitcases filled with 590 antiquities covered in foam and bubble wrap. So he had shipped them pretty good. These cultural treasures traveled across centuries and millennia, only to end up unceremoniously stuffed in a dirt-caked suitcase at JFK, said Richard P. Donahue, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. When U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents opened their packages, sand and dirt spilled out, and some of the items smelled of wet earth, indicating that they had been recently dug up, prosecutors alleged or assumed. Among the relics were made to be buried in the funerary pyramids of Egyptian royalty, such as gold amulets, wooden tomb models, including one that dated back to around 1900 BC, prosecutors claim. There was also 2 funerary stelae, or stone monuments to the deceased, hailing from the Roman period, the feds claim. Officers also found a portrait of a Ptolemaic king carved onto a tablet that had originally been part of a royal building or temple. And I wonder if they can find that piece and where that was taken from and try to put it back, or what's going on here. And we've seen in a lot of these videos that I have that there's a pocked up ground, and where they actually found it is because somebody found a hole in the ground. They went and looked, and it's a looted tomb. So they get there last instead of first. Well, Egyptologists aren't allowed to get there first. Must be looted. Prosecutors say El-Dadar did not have any of the required documentation from Egypt authorizing the export of the artifacts. And he is charged with 1 count of smuggling from this incident and another stemming from an earlier trip in which he allegedly smuggled an ancient Egyptian polychrome relief. So it isn't the first time. That sucks. El-Dadar's alleged smuggling of 590 artifacts pillaged from Egypt is yet another example of an individual seeking to profit by stealing history from another nation, said Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent in Charge Peter Fitzhugh. If convicted, El-Dadar faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in jail for each count. So is it 590 times 20 or something? A date for his arraignment in Brooklyn federal court has not yet been set, and this happened back in January, and we're all the way to here. And what about due process, and what the hell's going on? Let's see, is there any more on this? There was an advertisement. El-Dadar's attorney didn't immediately return a request for comment. Would you think that he would? So JFK Airport and Atlanta and DFW Airport, which I am near, and LAX, and a few airports, that's it, are import sites for delicate things. And you can't import things of a special nature through anyone plus that. For if they catch it trying to come in, they know you're trying to do something besides and around them. Okay? I used to import exotic fish and corals from around the world, and I got to deal with these guys one-on-one quite frequently. And before it was just considered Homeland Security here through these guys, I believe it's still out here is the Parks and Wildlife, but then they have that affiliation along with the concept, because it's usually smuggling things. For whenever I went in the office out there, they had a couple of rooms like this, and in the walls around the room on shelves and stuff were things that they had absconded that were illegally being shipped. And some of them were some weird ones and stuff, and stuffed animals and tusks from a hippo and things and stuff, and you just shipping ivory. You can't do it. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I got to deal with them and have them talk about it all the time. and talk about my corals and fish that we're importing. And you had to have a permit for every single fish. We were hooked up through a thing called CITES. It's the Continental International Trade of Endangered Species. Though the fish and the corals that I was importing were not considered endangered species except for in rare instances, it all falls under that. And what they basically do is they set a standard for how many fish can come out of an area for so much. So you can say the people that are allowed to fish and catch and sell to the fish exporters are only allowed to catch 1,200 of this type of fish, but only 600 of this type of fish, and da da da. And we actually, in the amount that we pay for these CITES permits and everything, which is an egregious amount, end up paying for these CITES people, and they repeatedly dive on these sites, and due to observation and the amount that fishing people are able to catch at a certain time, they deviate their numbers to make sure that this is a sustainable thing that continues on and on and on, right? Corals are done the same way. They'll find an area that's full of mainly, 80-90% one coral and some others in there. And they'll tell you that you can take a whole lot of those corals that are overgrowing that one type, say they're soft corals, finger leathers, and things like that, out of the area. Whenever you do so, it'll allow a bunch of other ones to come in. And is that okay? Well, secretly, everybody knows over time it's going to go back to the way it was because it's catering to that. No matter what you do, certain areas of the reef want to grow certain corals more than others, and other places grow other ones. But I've had problems and dealings with them before with things. The video I showed recently, and you can look up again, with Crocea clams and Maxima clams, and I would get in these guys that, roughly are about this big, and they're shaped like a football, but when they open up, they have these cool kick-ass colors, and this is a live creature. It's a live clam. And in Oriental countries and stuff, they'll actually eat these as a delicacy type thing, but Americans want them in their fish tanks, and Orientals do too and everything. They're way into the hobby. And these clams can grow to 6 or 8 inches, but they're sold through CITES under a permit, and those permits usually will contain 2 to 2.5 inch, 2.5 to 3 inch, and all this type of stuff. And lately, they got to where they were trying to break them down even more than that and things. But I was hooked up through a distributor that I get some of my clams from, and he called me up. It was an opportunity to stand up and step up somewhat. But I had him ship, or he had me ship through me over 500 clams that were coming to him. Now, these are in an aquacultured situation, although the numbers are still kept up with. They are grown in captivity, and they have nothing to do with the ocean, and never seen the ocean. In fact, the great-grandparents of these clams have never seen the ocean. They've been doing it long enough, so it really doesn't fall into the same thing yet. I had these guys look at these clams and say that they were more 2.5 instead of 2.5 and 3, and just a handful of them that they looked out of one box, out of 14 boxes worth of them. And so they decided, nah, you don't have the right permit, and they threw them all in the dumpster and let them rot and die. And there was nothing I could do about it. There was nothing I could do about it. They weren't even willing to say, well, how about we go through them and see which ones will, fall under your, oh my God, this one's a little over 2.5 inches, so we have to kill it. I mean, it's a live creature. There's no reason for anything like that. If I got them to ship back paper that said that there were half of them were 2.5, and half of them were 2.5 to 3, would we just fine in not killing things? So you can imagine what this comes to whenever somebody that's used to dealing with little clay pots or a tooth or something like that, and they treat it the same way as they do live creatures. And they're able to do so in most situations. But what's weird is most animals and things, of course, go to these rehab people and stuff, and maybe go through the hellacious amount of shipping it all the way back here and everything else. But these plantimals and these corals that are alive creatures, it's more like a plant, and we just toss it. But if you've ever dealt with these things, you consider them to be more than a plant, something that's important to the planet. I was a pioneer in part of what was and ended up becoming an aquaculture or mariculture industry. This is where I got this guy that I was dealing with directly. I got to be able to go through the guy, and to deal directly with this man in Bali, and he occasionally would be able to send me special corals, and I started to say, hey, if you get one, and blah blah blah, and try to hook up with the guy. And I told him I pay extra, even though you want to charge me the same thing for that type of deal, whatever, $10 extra, whatever, and that's a boon to him. Although the guy in between us that was doing one was doubling the price, ha ha ha, because he knew I wanted him real bad, and he got him. He used to buy him for the same damn price. Once you find out things like that, it kind of pisses you off, because they're just going in numbers and volume, and they got a bunch of people they're dealing with, and it doesn't matter, and you find out they're just in it for the screw thing sometimes. So I tried to bypass some of those guys and was able to. Anyhow, got down to a point where I said, hey, next time you find one of these, don't give it to me. And he's like, what? And I said, no. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to take and break it all up. And you know that putty stuff that you used to stick those corals onto that thing with? I'd like you to break it all up and put it on little chips of live rock and stick it to it with a piece of that putty. You make a little sconce area and hold it onto there where it grips onto it, and talk to them about doing it and stuff. And put those out in the wild and let them grow for a month, 2 months, and they'll be twice that size again, and nowhere near the size of the big guy. But then start handing them off to me and stuff, and keep some of them growing, and as they get bigger, you shatter them again and do it again, and you shatter them in and do it again. Well, you can't do that with all these guys, and some of these mushrooms and leather corals and toadstools, they're a soft coral, and they basically are adhered or sticking their foot to a piece of live rock, and you got to ship that piece of live rock in. So I had these guys here, and I'm shipping in exotic corals that have been maricultured. So already over and above, you don't feel like you're raping the ocean in any way. In fact, you're the group that's making sure it's not happening. In fact, they got these guys up into the point where they're repopulating reefs and stuff. They were the people that helped repopulate Fiji's reefs and so on. So it was a fantastic thing. But then you feel somewhat like you are on the cutting edge of the greatness of doing it, and the studies you're doing are leading to people that are studying the ocean in such a mass way to understand water quality issues and how they affect corals in a small environment, and how they can apply that towards the actual coral reef and save parts of Great Barrier Reef and so on like that, right? Bleaching events and all these things that go on. Well, what could you do? There's a lot of things, and maybe I'll make a video and talk about all the things that we went through and did like that. And we've separated entities together, cultured phytoplankton. It helps feed certain one of these corals and starts a chain of life, and you can do certain things. Phytoplankton also eats more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than the rainforest does by a factor of 5 or 6 easily. But that's another issue altogether. So I'd get these soft corals in, and they'd be on that chip of live rock. And if that live rock is more than like a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch and this, that, and the other, you've got to have a separate permit for live rock. What's live rock? Well, live rock is a chunk of the coral reef ocean, but it doesn't have any corals on it, right? And they don't ship it in water, because that'd be even more expensive because you're paying for the water. So they basically wet pack it in newspapers and things like that, and put it in these waxed boxes and ship it to us. And these guys are familiar with me getting in live rock. It's not some weird thing. It happens to everybody's coral reef because they stack up live rock and then put corals on it. So you have to have a special permit for it, and they'll call it scleractinia. It's just some kind of soft coral, basically. But then it has a nomenclature like actinodiscus or something like that are types of mushrooms, or it's this, that, and the other, right? But also, it'll have to have a permit for that piece of live rock. But these guys feel like if they want to be a dick about it, that they can look at that, and if they find a live rock that's a chip that this mushroom's on, that's this little bitty thing trying to exist, that they keep mushing around in a bag trying to see what the hell it is, because they double bag it and everything, triple bag them before they ship them to us, that they think that if it looks a little more 3/4, almost an inch this way by that way, even though if they were to cut it like that, it would kill the whole thing, they feel like, oh, I don't know here. And they get this attitude like that, right? Which is sad, you feel like it's the same thing that they're treating as like a little piece of plastic as well as they're treating this. But they have, everything's set this big standards and they're all up against this whole thing. And whenever something comes in live, they don't necessarily take a minute to take a deep breath and treat it differently. That's the problem that I had with them. And I eventually talked these people out of not killing corals after the clam incident and things that I went through with higher ups and talked to their boss and they didn't like me for a while. I got to slowly but surely talk to each one of them and explain that I'm trying to save things in life and the coral ocean and stuff. I'm not trying to smuggle in some mammoth horns and you're going to quit treating me as such. And then everything kind of changed. It was a lot better. Eventually, I had to shut the shop down, though. It eventually just was eating money from me going through too many adventures trying to do it. And it really was a luxury hobby, and at the time, that type of thing waned quite a bit. And a lot of people were selling out of their house, or they would have a whole house and build coral reefs into it and then sell out of that and not have an overhead of an extra shop that'll cost you $5,000 a month plus $1,500 electric plus this and everything else. So that kind of ruined that idea. But I had to deal with these guys quite a bit. I'd got in big leather corals, and of course they can't have a big piece of live rock on them too. Well, they have to. They have a foot that's bigger than a baseball, so that's bigger than an inch. So the rock's got to be bigger than an inch. And I had problems with them too. And I go, listen, we can go right now to shops around town, and every one of them has this coral, and it made it through this place. Am I speaking correctly to you? Then you're not going to sit here and play monkey gift with me about this crap. If you want me to take a hammer and chip a little bit more off of it and try to kill the edge of the foot of this thing, if you had somebody bring in a plant, you allow a certain amount of soil, but yet you can't go over a certain amount. Oh, it's okay. I just want to tell you that it's wrong. I want to tell you that the law is wrong then, because if this thing is a foot bigger than an inch, you're basically trying to kill it by taking all the live rock off of it. They're not something that can be peeled off the rock like an anemone and so on. And they don't know any of this. That's the problem. The husbandry of the hobby itself and everything, they have no idea about. And so if they get in a fish they don't know about, it's dead. Rarely do they take it to a place or call somebody and see if they want to get it and everything and do. What's strange about that is, okay, now just understand the fallacy that goes along here. They'll call some zoo or exhibit shop, that has an aquarium, if your shit falters and you can't have it. So they'll call them to come take it. Sometimes to keep it alive. Well, so what's the difference between them and me doing it? Well, you're the one that paid for it. They aren't even paying for it. Ha, ha, ha. That's the way it comes across. Well, I can't really compare that to stealing ancient Egyptian artifacts because I'm not doing things along that line. I mean, there were times where we fudged CITES permits. Now, hold on here. What we did was the guy talked to other distributors who still had numbers left on their CITES permit and used up their permits in my fish box. Is that illegal? Not in any way. No, it's just fine. But these people would frown upon it instantly like it was some kind of freak out. And I go, listen, all I'm looking for is a permit and it's saying it's okay. Please stop the monkey business and let's continue. You're looking for mammoth tusk ivory and people doing this type of thing that we're looking at here. I'm not that person. You will quit treating me like I am trying to be that person. They have to go through them over and over again. But they're just expecting something to happen. You can imagine. They're looking for it. And so almost in everything that they see, they try to see something wrong in it. Right? It's not even really like a cop, but somewhat. A cop, if he really wants to, he can just sit and just try to pick you apart. And they try to do this quite often. After you get the understanding with them, they would just look at a couple of corals that was in there or something and then turn around and let you go. Well, here's the secret. I started having the shipper ship them in black bags. So they take a bag and they put a black bag inside of it, and then another bag, and then they put the corals in there. So now you can't see it or nothing anyhow. So you might as well not pick them up out of the box, and we're all good. And you're not going to try to kill them by opening up the thing, are you? Well, I can't do that. No, you can't. Give me my box.